And thank you so much for listening. Don't forget that we podcast too. So if you miss any of these hours and you want to hear, say, the OneRoof radio show again, you can just go to iHeartRadio or iTunes and search for The Weekend Collective, and you can listen to whichever hour you want back. You can also see the links on our Facebook page too, facebook.com/ZB2. As you heard, this is the OneRoof radio show. So this is all things property, and joining myself and Tim Wilson is property expert and regular guest on The Weekend Collective, Ashley Church. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, guys. Nice to talk to you.
Ashley, great to have you with us. You, I think, might have cracked it. The whole capital gains tax conundrum, the issues with it, the political unpalatability, the confusion, the contradictions, Ashley. What is your crazy billion-dollar idea to totally solve it?
So I did hear the intro before, so no pressure.
Did you hear me saying that I was going to steal the idea?
I did, and look, it's yours. So I need to put a disclaimer on this right from the outset by saying I actually don't favour capital gains taxes. So this solution that you're talking about, that I'm going to go through in a couple of moments, is a solution, but I actually don't favour this either. So
all right, so I'll take it if it's good. I mean, if people like it. I'm only taking it if people en masse like it.
That's right, and if they don't, we'll back away real fast. Hey, so here's the background, guys. So capital gains tax, as everybody knows, is a tax on any profit you make or any increase in value you make on a taxed asset between the time that you purchase it and the time that you sell it. So if it's a house and you buy it for $500,000 and it sells for $750,000, you would pay tax on the $250,000 gain. So that's essentially what a capital gains tax is. Labor's been talking about one of these things for I think several terms. They came in this time round promoting one again, saying that they were going to introduce legislation prior to the election, and if they were re-elected that they would enact it and it would basically become policy. So they set up this working party with Sir Michael Cullen, came back with a series of recommendations, and he's basically recommended what I would regard as probably one of the most pernicious and vicious capital gains taxes in the world, particularly as it relates to property investment. So what he's done is he's basically recommended along the rest of the working party that there should be a capital gains tax on shares, business assets, a range of what they call intangible assets and investment housing, and there should be exemptions on the family home and certain personal assets such as jewellery and fine art. So what's already noticeable about that is that under this policy, they're basically saying any other asset, whether it's business assets, shares, etc., it doesn't matter whether you're actually involved in business, if those things make an increase in value, you'll pay tax on them. But for some strange reason known only to the Labor Party or to Michael Cullen, they're only proposing to tax property investors and not the family home. And the tax rate they're proposing to apply is 33%. So basically if you earn over 70 grand. So that's a really, really high, really vicious tax rate. It would be one of the highest in the world. And it basically means that if a property investor owned a property that increased in value from 650 grand to say 975 over 5 years, that's a 50% increase in its value, that person would pay $107,000 tax on that property at the end of that 5 years if they sold that property. That's an enormous amount of money relative to the total.
Could I just quickly jump in that the idea, as far as I see it, about not having the family home included, that I understand the concept, which is that if you are making a living from the buying and selling of properties, then there's the idea that you should be paying a capital gain tax, but the family home is not you making a living from that.
Yes, except that they don't apply that same philosophy to any of the other assets that they are proposing they should also put a capital gains tax on. So, for example, if you're a part-time investor, a shares investor, you buy shares, so you're not making a living from them, they're just a little sideline thing that you've got, they're certainly proposing that you should pay tax on those. So they're applying a different principle to the family home than they are to any of these other assets. And look, for me, the reason they're doing that's political. They're doing that because they recognise that if they would apply it to the family home, they think that would basically lose in the election, and so they've chosen not to.
Actually, I guess and that's a political calculation you would expect politicians to make, but that points up an issue that you're seeing with the capital gains tax, which is that it will be applied somewhere, applied not somewhere else. So pardon me. Let me phrase that better. It won't be applied in some places, but will be applied in others. and it'll be a difficult tax to enforce, correct?
Yes, absolutely correct, and for what appear to me basically to be political reasons. So that brings us to this solution that you guys seem so keen on. But I did some numbers on this, and I basically worked out that, so let's take the principle and say, what if we treated capital gains tax the same way we did with GST when we brought that in the 80s? So when we brought GST in, it just applied to everything. There was virtually no exemptions to it. It was across the board. It enabled us to put it on at a low rate, and it meant that it was very, very easy to collect because there was basically no exemptions.
Okay,
So
just
you
press
had
pause
very clean
there
system.
because we have a drum roll for you, Ashley. so we're going to have the drum roll, and then
Right.
you're going to reveal your
Right.
crazy idea. You've set it
Right.
up. Drum roll, please. Crazy idea. What is it?
Right. Well, the crazy idea is to do exactly the same thing we did with GST and make this thing universal, but at a much, much, much lower rate of capital gains tax than we're proposing to apply currently just on property investors. So to give you some real quick numbers, there's 1.8 million homes in New Zealand. About 180,000 of those, or 10% of them, are sold every year. If you based that tax on the example I used earlier with a property investor who bought a house for 650 grand and sold it in 5 years' time for 975, in other words, they made a 50% increase on it, but you only applied a capital gains tax of 3.5%, but it applied to everybody, the tax would be 11,375, not 107,000.
Wait. So can we just have the drum roll again, please? I just want to do this again. So that number, that percentage is what?
3.5,
3.5% as opposed to?
33.
So if we explain this, we're going to throw this out there because we want to hear from you if you're listening now and you'd like to be on with Ashley Church, 0800 80 1080. Crazy idea. Ashley Church has come up with it. Crazy idea. What about, drum roll again.
All right, that's enough of that.
I do need to add one last figure on that just to
okay.
give it some credibility,
Okay.
and that is that under the Cullen proposal, they are suggesting that at 33% on property investors, that'll raise $8 billion in the first 5 years.
Yeah.
This scheme, on those numbers I've just given you, would raise $10 billion in the first 5 years, so an extra $2 billion.
So it would raise...
Wait. So
this is good.
you're selling this as actually there'll be more tax taken. Hooray!
Which is why I had the caveat at the beginning, which is to say I don't support capital gains taxes.
All right,
But,
let's do it. 0800 80 1080. Crazy idea. What about a flat 3.5% capital gains tax? Give us a bell. What do you reckon? Is that good, Wilson?
Look, I like the idea of no exceptions. I like the fact that this will be easy because, and this is some of the arguments against the capital gains tax have been that it's a very difficult tax to apply. This, across the board, it seems simple. I don't love the fact it's going to be raising more tax, but we can take or leave that. I don't know why you just don't make it 3%, but anyway, you want your 3.5 to show you've been thinking. We were doing funny numbers last week, Ashley. So okay, you've done your homework. So 3.5%. I know that I could probably live with this.
Let's go to the phones. 0800 80 1080. Stephen, what do you think?
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. I'm just like to ask a question. Like the family home is not affected. What if I got an investment property? I decide to sell my own home and keep the investment property. Do I pay tax on that?
So these are some of the sorts of...
And then I can keep buying my own home and keep that investment property.
Yeah, so these are some of the questions that I don't think they've worked out yet. So what's happened so far, Stephen, is that they've come out with a general overview of what the policy is going to include, but there's a whole range of detail I think that they would need to work through, and that's one of those really good questions.
Yeah, and also I don't think that'll have an effect on the housing price because whatever tax you like to add on that, and it will be passed on to the buyer. It's just like a GST, normal GST, and the buyer will end up paying more to buy that property.
Yeah, the
And that could
poor
be
old
the
end
first
user,
home
eh?
buyer. Yeah.
So, Stephen, what about Ashley's idea that if we are going to have a capital gains tax, and Ashley's saying that he's not in favour of one, but if we are to have one, that it's a flat tax right across the board, 3.5%, what do you think?
Still, that 3.5% will be added onto the selling price. Let's say I want to sell it for $1 million. Now it's $1 million plus 3.5%. Without that, I'm not selling. So,
You won't notice.
Would you vote? Okay, but let's say you just factor it in, Stephen. Would you vote again for a government that enforced let's say implemented a tax of capital gains tax of 3.5%? Would you suck it up?
No, I won't. Basically, I think that this is heavily legislated country, and will legislate things for almost everything. I don't think the government should interfere with the market, like the housing market. Like it or not, it's still a market, like it's selling veggies, and you can't say from now on the broccolis can't be sold for more than $2. You just can't do that.
Well, you should have seen what New Zealand was like, 40 years ago before so many different things were deregulated. We were
Pretty much.
very, very regulated.
Actually, I think though that Stephen has raised a point, which is that tax being your idea, Ashley, the tax being so low. I believe that this was implemented as a measure to constrain the housing market, to get people to invest in other in other things apart from property. With 3.5%, no one's going to be bailing out a property, that nothing's going to change.
So it depends on who you talk to, because some people within the Labour Party are claiming that was an objective and some people are claiming it wasn't. So it depends on who you listen to. There are those who are saying, no, this is about reform of the tax system. It's about fairness. It's about parity. It's got nothing to do with the housing market. That's a totally separate issue that we're dealing with another way. So, which to be fair, is actually what they should be doing. But I'm with you. I actually think that if you look at this is more about. I mean, I've referred to this several times publicly as an envy tax. This is a tax about which is appealing to the heart of the Labour base, and it's about essentially punishing people who've tried to set themselves up for retirement.
We want to hear from you. 0800 80 10 80. Ashley Church's or Tim Roxburgh's crazy idea. What about a flat across the board 3.5% capital gains tax? Could you live with it? 0800 80 10 80. You can text on 9292. M says, yes, I agree with applying CGT to everything at a low rate with no exemptions. Another text, a new tax is a new tax. Once it's introduced, even at 0.5%, it will increase just like GST. What part of this don't you get?
Yeah, well, I do get that, and I agree with that particular texter, so...
So it's Tim Roxburgh's idea.
So it's Tim Roxburgh's idea.
It's my idea. If the overall public, the majority, if they like it, then I'm claiming it. But
No worries.
We're just testing the waters at the moment, and that's very handy because we're doing talkback. 0800 80 10 80. Neil, hi. What do you think?
Yes, hi. I just would like to ask something. Now, the idea I think is okay. Now, what about even a situation in my situation? I've got 18 properties, residential properties, and 6 commercial properties.
Right.
Will that actually mean that if I sold my commercial properties, it will also apply to the commercial property as well?
Well, again, that's one of those things where the details haven't been released, but my understanding is it's any increase in the value of any property, whether it be residential or commercial.
All right. Okay, so even if I sold, will that be based on the GV or on the market value price?
So that's a very astute question, and the answer is we don't know yet. So this is this question, guys, of how you actually determine the starting value of it, and at the moment there's been all sorts of theories of how that might be done, but there's actually no set answer yet. So, for example, we might have a what we call a valuation day, which is that the day the policy comes in, every property in the country gets valued. It might be done the same way as rates are done, where there's an assessed value done by a computer system, but at the moment there's actually no set answer on that.
Just wondering, Neil, if we could come back to you, whether you like the 3.5% flat tax for capital gains. What do you think of the idea?
Yes, I think it's a good idea because, first of all, everybody sort of pays for that. And the other thing is this. The Inland Revenue Department's computer system is not even up to date, so they won't be able to handle that sort of the GST which the current report is saying. So I think it's fair, but to be really fair, I wouldn't want to pay anything because well, I mean I'm paying tax, but I would want to pay, and I don't want to pay anything on profit because I'm legally making money out of it, not illegally. But.
Well, not surprisingly, people don't want to make less money. That concept is not a difficult one. We had Grant Robertson on. Thank you for the call, by the way, Neil. We had Grant Robertson on a few weeks ago talking about this. And the idea was, imagine that you're in a lift with someone and you've got like 30 seconds in the lift. And lift conversations are generally pretty awkward anyway. Anyway, so you're in the lift and you're trying to convince someone, we put this to Mr. Robertson, of why this is a good idea. And for him, it was just the idea of fairness. It was just like, this is how people make their money. how some people make their money, and it just doesn't seem fair that they aren't paying tax. And then I think, Wilson, you said, the lift had already stopped. But
Yeah, look, Grant Robertson's a great guy, but politicians aren't given to brevity.
No.
But Ashley Church has been able to summarise his idea very, very well. Capital gains tax of flat.
So it's my idea now, Tim.
It's now back to your idea.
Right, okay.
3.5% across the board, bit like GST. It's CGT with a bit of GST. 0800 80 10 80. What do you think of it? We'd love to hear from you.
let's go to Tom. Hi.
Hey guys. Hey, yeah, this is exactly what these guys want. To put in something lower and think, oh, aren't we lucky we didn't get the 33%? It's playing right into their little socialist hands.
Yeah, I think there's probably some truth in that. There is an argument that says that this thing's been presented in a way to be particularly aggressive so that whatever they come up with, whether it's this or something else, we'll all breathe a sigh of relief and say, oh, thank God, it's not as bad as it was going to be. So I have some sympathy with your view on that.
So it's a stint. It's they should be congratulating people for actually saving to try and better themselves instead of beating the snot out of them.
No, preaching to the converted.
I know, but it's like, oh, what can't the rest of New Zealanders see? It's just going to drive a wedge between a lot of people.
Well, it is important to know, Tom, that whether this is, having a capital gains tax or exactly the detail of it, whether you believe it's a good idea or not, that it is a very, very old political strategy, and one that John Key used very, very well, which is, and it has a name, and I can't remember what the name of it is. You might
Politics.
know, Tim. Maybe it's just politics. But you throw out the idea, and you throw out the most exaggerated version of the idea so that you look more reasonable when you come back. It's not unique to Labour. National did it very effectively, and it's smart politics.
It also plays to a particular aspect in New Zealand. Well, not just New Zealand political debate, but people don't. New Zealanders, I don't think we don't like extreme positions. And I think if what Ashley's done, which has taken an extreme position and then reduced it to something that sort of seems more palatable, it's actually it's very, very cunning, Mr. Church.
0800 80 10 80. Ashley Church, our property commentator, is with us, and he's had a crazy idea. What about a flat 3.5% capital gains tax across the board? Welcome your thoughts, John. What do you think?
Yes, it's the best news I've heard all week, actually. This month. I actually congratulate Ashley on doing the figures on it, because that's what I thought myself. It should be across the board. Of course, that's completely politically untenable, because won't vote for it. And I was born in 1949. Most of my friends got married in the early 70s. And if you remember that, the price of houses doubled from 73, very low base, only about 20,000 per house, to 975. And Bill Rowling brought in a capital gains tax on if you sold your house within 2 years. And
what happened to house prices? Do you remember?
Huh?
Do you remember what happened to house prices after that?
No, they basically increased, and I think Ashley said that somewhere else. They've increased in about 4 different. They've increased ever since 1973.
What's interesting, though, is that after 75, when he introduced that, they actually dropped by 38%. It's the only crash we've ever had. Between 1975 and 1980, house prices dropped by almost 40%.
Wow.
What kind of a drop in house prices could you promise with the Ashley Church capital gains tax?
Well, under this proposal, you wouldn't have a drop in price. Basically, the cycle would carry on as it always has. And look, to be honest, the first caller, Stephen, talked about the fact that this would just be passed on. So there actually is an argument that says that even if you applied it at that higher rate, it wouldn't necessarily have an impact on overall prices. I mean, you'd need to do the numbers on that, but that's not. We shouldn't be basing it on that. We should be basing it on whether or not this is actually fair.
We'll take a break. Ashley Church is our property expert. That's the OneRoof radio show, 0800 80 10 80. Ashley, who isn't, as we've said, in favour of a capital gains tax. But if there was one, he's come up with this idea. What about a flat 3.5% capital gains tax? We're after your thoughts on that. 0800 80 10 80. It's 4:25 on NewsTalk ZB.
It's time to knuckle down. No time to run around. Acting crazy is real. Nothing fugazi until I'm Swayze. Ghost. I'm trying things that seem crazy.
NewsTalk ZB and the Weekend Collective, just coming up to 4:30 on a Saturday afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. And this is our Property Hour, the OneRoof radio show. So it's all things property. You can text on 9292 0800 80 1080. And we've got property expert and commentator Ashley Church with us as we talk about the idea, and maybe it's a crazy idea, what about a flat 3.5% capital gains tax? Excuse me. I'm choking on the excitement.
Choking on the excitement, the energy, the emotion, the fact that your wallet's going to be 3.5% lighter, but everyone's will, so it's fair.
Normally I'm able to turn the mic off and do that little cough, but that was not one of those times. Anyway, let's go.
What happens. You see, you're an economist now, Roxy.
That's right.
You're not a broadcaster.
No.
0800 80 1080. James, what do you think of Ashley's idea?
Yeah, just like Ashley, I'm certainly not a fan of capital gains, but something like that's going to be fair and equitable and just so easy to implement. It's not going to be funny. There'll be no loopholes and no silliness. And if we go down the route of this harsh one, I agreed with what Ashley said. There's an ideology. Half of Labor thinks let's make it more affordable for housing, and the other half want to harm people that have done well. But, you know, the other day on Duncan Garner's show, Phil Twyford was in opposition and there was 4,000 people, which is terrible, waiting for Housing Corp houses, and he called it a national disaster. It's now 10,000. So I don't know what it is now. If it was a national disaster then, I don't know what it is now. And if we do implement that harsh capital gains tax, you will see people dumping property because they've got to signal that in 6 months or 9 months or 3 months it's coming in. You're going to see a flood on the market, and the people who own that big rental portfolio, they're renting it to people who can't afford to buy houses, and it's not as if Labor's built enough houses for those people to go. So I'm not sure where they're going to live.
All right, James, thanks for the call. Ron, hi.
If Labor brings in capital gain tax, they can say goodbye and they'll be history for many years. End of story. Bye.
I like someone who's short and sweet. Got
his point across.
Got a text here, actually two texts.
Yep.
Ashley for PN, and then the next text says, oops, PM.
Is PN or something?
That won't be happening. So anyway, but thank you.
Just as far as, the previous caller, I mean, I know the brevity was the beauty of that call, but I think that there's a basic understanding that most people have, whatever your politics are, that there has to be a difference. You'd hope there's a difference between the ideology of Labor versus National. Otherwise, what's the point of having two different parties? So
it's worth just spelling out too, Tim, that there is an aspect to this that I actually have some sympathy with, and it's this view that income's income regardless of where you get it from. So at the moment we tax income. If you go and work or do what you guys are doing at the moment and get paid for it, that's income. The argument is if you make a capital gain on shares or property or what have you, then that's also income and it should be taxed in the same way. So okay, that's reasonable, but if you're going to do that, do it fairly. Do it in a way which is fair to everybody. Don't have special rules for one group of society over another.
And this is a text from Stephen, Ashley. All these people who don't want to pay CGT on returns on investment make me nauseous. Do you think most investors in the share market or equally factory workers want to pay tax? Can anyone explain what makes property investors, as an example, exempt?
Yeah, and that's a fair question, and that's the whole philosophical debate around this thing that I think we need to work our way through, and that's why we need to find a solution that's going to be fair on everybody and not too much of an imposition.
Thank you for texting through 9292. Ashley Church is with us, and you can be on 0800 80 1080. Jeffrey, hello.
Good afternoon. I have a question, please. If I have a property portfolio that is subject to GST, when I divvy up and sell, am I subject to capital gains tax and the GST, a double tax?
So I would imagine so, but I'm not a tax accountant, so you need to check that with a specialist, but I would imagine so. I would imagine whatever rules applied to any other aspect of that transaction would apply to capital gains taxes.
Well, you might not have anything left in the end, won't you?
Well, there's that.
Okay.
Here you go, though. Okay, so it's a property would be a goods or a good, singular, an item.
That's an interesting question. I mean, rental properties at the moment, rent doesn't attract GST. So, and you can choose to be registered or not registered for GST when you're purchasing a property. So there's a bit of confusion in that whole space at the moment. So I don't know that there is a simple answer to that. And again, I think it's one of these things they probably haven't worked through the detail of.
So with this proposed crazy idea, 3.5% flat tax, would you add GST to it, or is it just the 3.5%?
Don't know. honestly
don't know. I love it. I love it. At last, a politician who says,
I am not a politician.
I know, but
He's not a politician.
I'm offended.
run, Ashley, run.
Are you confused as to who Ashley Church is? He's
But I
property
just...
commentator,
He's a property
property
commentator,
expert, all-round good guy.
all-round good guy, working for OneRoof as a commentator as well, and regular guest on the Weekend Collective.
And
But
apparently now a politician.
the Ashley Church Party.
Yeah, it's a broad church.
Winston's got it.
There you
Winston's
go.
already done that. So.
0800 80 1080 9292 to text. And Angus, hi.
Hey, you're not.
Yeah, we're good. What do you reckon?
Yeah,
Ashley's
Angus.
come up with this idea. 3.5% flat CGT. What do you reckon?
I would say that what you said earlier has happened. They've put in, it's going to be 33%, and they've probably calculated already what they can get away with putting in and still getting in back in the government. So they may have calculated out that we'll say, tell everyone we're going to do 33%, and then we'll say, we've decided we only need to do 5% or whatever. That's a pretty...
Angus, I'll tell you why I don't think that's going to happen. It's because they've gone to the electorate to the last 3 elections and this one, saying that they are absolutely not going to apply it to the family home, that's an intractable policy. So while they might moderate this one with regard to property investors, they're not going to do what I'm suggesting. At the moment, I'm just flying a kite. It's not going to happen.
True. My gripe is that we elect all the ministers of parliament and the whatever to try and run the country for a shot.
Yep.
And they get in there and all they do is flip and argue. Now, what my point is, let's imagine that for whatever reason the capital gains tax is a really good idea.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So why are we arguing about whether it's a good idea or not? If it's a good idea, it's a good idea. So both sides of the house should just say, okay, I agree with that. That's actually a good idea. Let's implement that. Now, it just annoys me. Like I run a small business,
Right.
and I have there's only me and my wife in it, but I have an understanding of how larger companies and businesses run.
Yeah.
You don't go in there in 2 halves, and one half argues against the other, and then if the other half gets to run it for a couple of years, they strip out what the other half did, and then when the other half takes it back over, they strip out what they did, and it's just ridiculous.
So you're saying that politics is a metaphor for marriage, basically, so that your relationship with your wife is a guide to how Parliament should be run. Look, all joking aside, though, I don't know if I want to live in a country where there isn't an argument between 2 parties, because as much as I might disagree with the other side, and I obviously have a political flavour, as most people will appreciate, I actually think it's a really good thing that we do have that constant tension and conflict of ideas, because that's what makes countries progress.
It's
and if
democracy.
you didn't, you'd end up with a dictatorship, and I don't want that. I don't know if anybody does.
I think also ideas are connected to values, and people don't share the same values. So a debate about ideas, about concepts, is actually a debate about what do you really care about. And I think to be able to have that debate, unlike places like the United Arab Emirates, it's a pleasure to be able to participate.
Also, and I think it's important for callers like Angus to understand that you can look back through history, and yes, that you have an opposition who will generally oppose things, but when they get into government, they don't actually repeal everything. They might make changes, but there are some things that they carry on with. Their opposition to them may have been in part because they were in opposition, but some of those ideas, if it's a good idea, it doesn't matter where it comes from, and they do carry on with it.
In fact, GST is a really good example of that. Labor brought it in the 80s. National was vociferously opposed to it. When they came back into power in 1990, they continued with it, in fact increased it. So good example of what you're saying.
0800
That's
80
not a great
1080.
example of politics, to be honest.
No, but it's a good example of what I was saying. Good work. Excellent. Andrew, you're on with Ashley Church. Hello.
Yeah, hello, Andrew. Ashley just touched on a little bit what my line of thinking. I think the idea with the capital gains was to sort of modify the housing market. If you're going to start a new tax and you're going to go as low as 3% on everything, then it's kind of just another tax grab. Why don't they just increase GST by 0.5% or 1% to bring in the same amount they want to? And you've already got the administration all set up there. It costs you nothing, and and it's achieving that tax grab, which obviously a low capital gains tax is just.
Yeah, it would need a bit more than that. So basically, at the last year, I think we brought in 20 billion in GST at 15%, which means that every 1% is 1.5 billion. So to raise the same sort of money, you'd have to raise it nearly 2%, and I'm not sure that would be very palatable to the electorate. But I get your point.
Thanks for the call. We're going to take a quick break and carry on with this conversation with Ashley Church in a moment. The crazy idea, what about a flat 3.5% capital gains tax? We will return with that, plus before 5 o'clock. OneRoof radio show. You can check out their website, oneroof.co.nz, and we'll have a look at one of the top listings because this one is described as New Zealand's greenest house. We'll find out why it's so awesome.
Bit of a doozy, eh, Roxy?
It is a bit of a doozy, Wilson.
You haven't heard that since the 90s?
Well, it is the 90s. It's a state of mind, the 90s, and it's always the 90s. Anyway, this one is a doozy. You're quite right. 0800 80 1080. Text us on 9292. It's 21 minutes to 5. 18 minutes to 5 on a Saturday afternoon. And Wayne, welcome to the program. You're on with us and with Ashley Church.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to say that a 3.5% across-the-board capital gains tax is very easy to administer, and I can understand why they would suggest that. So net gain might seem good, but I'm assuming that if you have to pay capital gains taxes, you can claim against capital losses, and if they bring in a 3.5% flat rate annually, the housing market will tank, particularly in expensive towns like Auckland, and the IRD might be having a lot of people claiming losses, and the net effect will be they get less money. And I think the fairer approach would be to treat everyone individually and also index it to inflation. I bought property for a hedge against inflation, and I think they should index capital gains tax to inflation. I think they should index bank savings accounts to inflation, and I think they should index the free student loans to inflation like they do in Australia. There's free loans over there. I know I'm getting off subject, but you don't get away scot-free. You still have to have your loan indexed to inflation. It's common sense. Otherwise,
so two responses, Wayne. Two responses. So firstly, the Cullen report did actually refer to the issue of capital losses. So just for everybody else's benefit, what that means is if you pay tax on a gain on a property, can you claim a tax write-off on the basis of a loss? And there was some reference to that. So yes, you're right. That's potentially an outcome of this, although there was no detail around how that would actually be administered or what it would mean. But with regard to the bigger issue, and I probably should have said this at the outset, if you're going to reform your tax system, reform your system. And that's not what this working party did. What this working party did was it basically said, how can we raise more tax? And it came up with a range of different ways of doing that under the guise of saying that it was about making the system fair and reforming it. If you're going to have a reform of your tax system, throw the whole thing up in the air, look at how you do it and see what falls down. And because if you did that, I suspect you'd have a range of quite different options to what this working party's ended up with.
And just a note, I think that Wayne, our caller, just previous caller, was under the impression that this is something that the government has proposed. No, it's not. This 3.5% across the board capital gains tax is an idea that Ashley Church has floated as a bit of a balloon. It's not government policy. No one in the government is proposing it. We're just thinking outside the square about how a politically palatable capital gains tax might look like.
We're revolutionary guys.
Yeah, I've even come up with a name for it, the Roxburgh tax.
Ooh. Well, that's what, if it's popular, as we've been saying, that I'm going to claim it. Unpopular, then, I've got other things to claim.
We'll call it the Roxy tax if it's unpopular. It's just more friendly.
0800 80 1080. Doug, hi.
G'day, guys. How you doing?
Yeah, we're good, thanks.
Good.
Hey, I think any form of tax is a form of theft, but
Sure.
I don't think it's the real issue. I was under the impression that the capital gains tax was a way of decreasing house prices.
No.
Now, overseas proves that that's not the case, and I think the real issue keeps getting glossed over, and that's the availability of credit. I think it's the record low interest rates, and this isn't just a New Zealand problem with housing becoming unaffordable. It's a worldwide problem. Record low interest rates to, what would we say, weaken their currencies so that their exporters look more popular, but it's not something that is widely discussed, and I think it's a huge issue because my parents own rental properties and they would be lovely to forget the stress of tenants by putting their money in the bank, but they are actually losing money at 3% interest rates, you take out inflation, they're losing capital. I lived in Europe where they have negative interest rates, so you're actually paying the bank to loan its money.
If I could play devil's advocate, though, the argument to that, and I don't necessarily agree with what I'm about to say, but the argument to that is, yes, they're losing money on the day-to-day transactions, but the property's doubling in value every 10 years, and therefore they're actually making a capital gain. And that's I guess, the nub of this thing about where that tax should actually sit.
Yep, but it's not reducing the prices because they keep going up overseas. It's the availability of credit. They're giving away free money to look after their currencies.
Yeah.
Do you believe this goes? Do you believe this goes back to the whole quantitative easing thing that was after the GFC?
Well, the Labour government and national government, any government in the world, they want their constituents and their population to feel wealthy, so they have the confidence to consume. And when we consume, the government makes a truckload of cash.
Correct.
But Doug, you said at the start, any tax you sort of regard as theft. But what about schools, roads and hospitals? I just find it such a bizarre idea.
Well, for sure. It was perhaps a bit general at the start.
Doug is coming in hot.
No, but I hear people say this.
It was a good opening, though.
I hear people say this and no one says anything. I was like, I can't let it slide. We need hospitals, we need schools, we need roads. The tax is not the devil.
We do. But here's the thing. Often I think almost everyone feels this way. There's an emotional response to tax, which is like, why should I give you my money? I don't agree with everything you do. I'm all for hospitals, roads and schools, but there's a whole bunch of other crap the government does that I'm actually vehemently opposed to.
And that's why we vote.
What's that?
That's why we vote.
No, I don't want to give them money for it. No.
All right, we got to keep moving. Dean, hi.
Hi there, guys. Look, really interesting conversations this afternoon. Just 2 points I kind of wanted to put across. There doesn't seem to be much consideration about risk and reward. You know, when we're talking about a fair and equitable tax system, you were making some comparisons between, property speculation, profits from that, and income tax.
Yeah.
You know, and you'd never have your employer saying to you, hey, listen, if the market starts to drop and our share price goes down, we might not be paying you your normal salary this week, or we might be not paying you anything. And that's the thing that people got to realise. If someone's putting a load of money into a property to make improvements and try and get some return on it, some entrepreneurship, there is a bit of a reward factor that should be in there for sure. And the second point behind that is, we've got one of the highest personal private company ownership per capita in the OECD. We're a nation of small business owners. And the moment we start taking away the reward from the risk factor I'm talking about, we start to really stifle our entrepreneurial spirit that this country really stands out against the whole rest of the world. I mean, we work off the number 8 wire. We're so creative as a country and business people that we manage to do things. We make amazing things happen with very little capital to put into the project or the equation.
It's like the heater that my dad made out of an old barbecue. Yeah. No, sorry, it was the barbecue he made out of an old heater. I got that wrong.
Maybe that's why it didn't quite take off.
but no, wise words, and I don't think I can add anything to that. That's a very wise word.
Thank you for the call, Dean. No, it was a barbecue made out of an old heater. And I was, at the time, I was so embarrassed because he invited. Oh no, good question. Invited around the neighbours, and I was like, "This is so embarrassing. Our barbecue is an old heater," and yet, it worked fantastically. Yeah. And so
it would be regarded as retro now, and people would pay a fortune for
exactly, and I admire him for it. All right, have a listen to this, guys. Are you ready for it? This is the top listing on the OneRoof website, which is oneroof.co.nz, and it's described as New Zealand's greenest house. It's just one of 5 standalone houses in the country that are rated as so world leading.
Is it teal?
No, it's not teal. It is in fact, and I'm looking at the outside. I'd say it's a light brown with elements of off-white. But anyway, so it is so green that it has a 10-star Homestar rating. So 5 and 6 can be pretty good. This one's got 10, and here's a fun fact: this house uses 80% less energy than a normal house. And it has 32, I've never said this word before, photovoltaic panels on the roof, and that means it produces 35% more electricity than what's consumed during normal operation.
Where is it? Where did you say it was?
It's I didn't actually reveal, which was kind of a crucial part of the conversation, wasn't it? Good question, actually. Beachlands. It's in Beachlands.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this house is actually revenue positive. You give the if it's generating more energy, more electricity,
Puts
you
it back
make
into the grid. Yeah.
Plug it into the grid.
Good times. OneRoof.co.nz for more. Ashley Church, thank you as always. That was great fun.
Always welcome, guys.
Thanks, Ashley.
It's 8 minutes to 5. NewsTalk ZB.